Good morning, everyone. Welcome to IGTV, and with us this morning is Mark Capers, and Mark will be talking about the advanced persistent threat. Go ahead, Mark. Hopefully it's not all spin.
It is not all spin, I'm afraid, and we're going to be seeing more and more incidents of this, and some of it's getting picked up in major media, as well as some things that probably don't fall quite into the APT category, have enough characteristics of APT that it ought to give us pause and scares. So again, this is going to be a 10-minute practical InfoSec primer on advanced persistent threats and why your set it and forget it security appliances and managing that aren't going to be enough to cope with that type of attack. Quickly, what is an advanced persistent threat? In a nutshell, it is a purpose-built attack that is targeted specifically to the organization that it is attacking, and the goal is typically stealing information, identity theft, but potentially it can be used to compromise infrastructure. APTs always occur using multi-channel attacks, different types of intrusions, and a lot of times they use spear phishing and spoofed attack methodology to get the employees or the individuals in the organization to unwittingly assist them in penetrating their infrastructure. After the penetration occurs, it is a low and slow methodology. It's like cooking good barbecue. The stuff sits in the background. It just kind of boils away until they're ready to gather all the information that they're attacking and then exfiltrate it out of the organization. And this is where the two other characteristics that usually define APTs come into play, and that is exfiltration methodology and command and control structure to control the multiple attacks. So that's why it's persistent. You've got a lot of different attacks going after whatever the target is in your infrastructure, and they use a command and control and exfiltration to pull that stuff out. And again, this is kind of where the limitations of your typical, standard security appliance, antivirus, IDS, and things of that nature will fall short, because if you look at an intrusion, you get a positive alert, and you investigate it, and you solve that problem, you might be solving the infrastructure protection and the perimeter protection layer, but if you're not looking at this as an intelligence attack, then you're going to miss the big picture. Unfortunately, the buzzword is new. A lot of the security companies, a lot of people out there are really starting to yammer this up, and for good reason. But it's more than a buzzword. The actual attack and the actual methods are very, very old as crime themselves. But now the technology exists where they're using these new tools to go after your information and use the internet and a lot of the malware out there. And there's a big malware economy growing in the black market to support all this stuff. There's a very good definition of advanced persistent threat over at Dumbella, and they talk about why it's advanced, why it's persistent, and why it's a threat. And I will say one of the differences with the threat part of this is it's always human intelligence directed. It's not a robot zombie out there just making targets of opportunity. This is someone or a group of individuals who have specifically chosen their target for specific reasons. And this will drive us into some of our defense methods a little bit later on. Some of the motives, typically some of the popular APT threats right now are identity theft, bank fraud, intellectual property theft. However, it's important to understand that there are a lot of other motives, not just financial. You'll see a lot of state-sponsored espionage, and the security blogs are alight with arguments about whether Stuxnet was a APT or not. I'm somewhere on the fence about it because APT does have a lot of the hallmarks, or Stuxnet has a lot of the hallmarks of an APT, but it may not have been a very good one. You've got stealing of intellectual property. If you are operating critical infrastructure or SCADA, APT could be used to disable as a first strike capability for a nation state, or if you are subject to terrorist targeting. It could be used to destroy your operating capability. If you do things that the environmental terrorists don't like, you might be a target of APT. And obviously, Al-Qaeda and other groups are looking at this for both in terms of financing and other methods of attack. Dictatorships and other less friendly state sponsors might use APTs to get information on dissident groups and other things. I'm not going to focus on that here because we're about infrastructure protection. Some of the scary indicators about APT rising in our environments. Last year, for instance, Russian organized crime made more money on online banking fraud than the drug cartels did from cocaine. So this is big business. According to Verizon's 2010 data breach report, 86% of the victims of information data breaches had indication of the breach in their log files. So this will get very relevant when we start looking at countermeasures and response methodologies. RSA found that 88% Fortune 500 companies had infections by Zeus. Nasty stuff. And, we all knew about how bad Aurora was. In addition, there's a global underground economy supporting this, and there are a lot of different types of actors in that economy. You've got all the malware, bot developers, and the clearinghouses for the technology, as well as the people who operate the technology. Then you have the clearinghouses and the money laundering and the actual on-the-street criminal enterprises, and they're married up, and there's a lot of money going back and forth, and people are making a living off this stuff. So that brings us to quickly how to defend against APTs. I've spent a lot of the series talking about getting to know your business stakeholders, understanding your data in your organization, and understanding what your business risks are. This is why it's critical. If you don't understand the business that you operate and what's valuable, you cannot protect it. So good intelligence and good modeling are going to combine to give you a proactive response to your environment. And to do that, you have to think of this as an intelligence problem, not as a perimeter, build a better fence problem. So you need to understand your business risk, understand where your information is, understand your people and your processes, because your people are key into typically allowing this stuff into your organization. And understand what your normal behavioral processes look like, both in terms of people and network. When you start seeing things going out of your network to strange places, and the only way you're going to do that is start by getting outside of your security appliances boxes and start looking at your router logs, looking at your proxy logs, and saying, hey, why is this going to this weird domain? That's a big part of interrupting the command and control. So if you're not doing so already, you need to determine how you can correlate your network and security event information to help you identify those command and control structures and your exfiltration. Sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they set up a separate bastion that they pump your intellectual property to. And again, going through your routers and your firewalls and other outbound traffic management systems will help you greatly in identifying that stuff. Again, the APT-P is persistent. There will be multiple attacks within your infrastructure. They will use a multiple set of intrusion methodologies. Possibly they'll use different malware. So understand that you're going to be tracking different types of intrusions. Some may be successful, some may not be. And you need to determine once you determine what they're after, that'll help you formulate a defense. So again, it's getting smart about your users and your business processes and understanding the keys to your kingdom and where you keep the crown jewels. Mike Kloppert over at SANS.org writes at the Computer Forensics blog. He's actually started to describe what he calls high-level security intelligence, advanced attacks, and he's talking about advanced persistent threats. He's developed something that I think garners a further look as a serious methodology to start dealing with this, because our automated tools simply aren't there yet, unless you're in a huge organization, and even then, the amount of information that you're dealing with is staggering. So he has taken 7 attack phases of an intrusion and again, when you have an advanced persistent threat, you have multiple attacks. So if you take these 7 attacks and use them as attributes and start tracking against them, that will allow you to see patterns in attacks, especially when you get down to trying to identify command and control and what the actions on intent are. Those 7 phases quickly are recon. People are doing recon against your organization, identifying what their targets are, identifying what they're going to attack. Weaponization, what malware are they going to use, what methods of attack are they going to use, how are they going to get into your systems. And that can just be, email attachments, forge LinkedIn, somebody gives you data sticks. If somebody gives you a free data stick, make sure you reformat that before you use it. Or if you're like me, you'll stick it in a forensic program to see what's really on it. Although I did read one set of malware tools actually was geared to corrupt encase, which was a little frightening. They've got the delivery phase where they actually get it to your organization. They start exploiting. It's the installation of basically the structure by which they will command and control, either by, to compromise systems or steal data. You've got the command and control, and then you've got their action on intent. So by looking at all the different attacks, if every attack has those 7 things, and you see some common delivery, common installation, or common command and control, that helps you deal with stopping the exfiltration and the command and control. So as you go on and think about these attributes, make sure you use some sort of similar taxonomy in your incident response tracking system. And and I can't stress enough, have an incident response tracking system, track your false positives. If you can identify false negatives, great, track those, and track all your incidents, and make sure that you start looking at trends in your incidents. Try to correlate outside of that. Make sure you try to include your proxy logs, routers, firewalls, etc. Main goal here is stop command and control and exfiltration. If you stop them, you stop the APT. And remember, this is an exercise in intelligence, not perimeter security. If you don't understand your target, the motives, and the opportunities, you're not going to prevail. So that's APT in a nutshell, and I'll give you some additional resources on the chat in just a second.
Yeah, Mark, I know it's difficult. The best thing, of course, is having a plan in place and making errors and learning from them. All right, because if people don't make errors, they don't learn from them. They've got to learn. They've got to learn about making these plans and find out later on where the potholes are, and then kind of go through all that, right?
And again, this is kind of like a meta incident, because you've got to look at all your different incidents. I mean, it's tough enough to get a regular incident response operation running, and then now this is almost an additional layer of intelligence on top of that to say, okay, well, we're stopping the nuisance stuff, and we're stopping the everyday garden variety attacks that everybody copes with. Now, who's really after us and who's really trying to target us? And that's a very difficult challenge to overcome.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Great setup on this. Hopefully the 7 tools come out onto the chat so everybody can see that, and the additional links as well. Great talk today.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, bye now.
Cheers.